Tonight, we're flying over ancient Egypt with the shadow of a falcon stretching across the desert, because our story isn't just about a god with wings, it's about a throne, about order and chaos, about a child raised in hiding who grows up to challenge the most dangerous force in the Egyptian cosmos. This is Horus, the sky god, the protector, the model of kingship, and the central figure in one of the most important myths ever told along the Nile, the struggle for Egypt itself. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why Horus isn't just a falcon god. He's the reason the pharaoh could claim legitimacy, the reason the Eye of Horus became one of the most powerful symbols of protection in human history, and the reason Egyptians believed chaos could never truly be destroyed, only defeated, contained, and put in its place. So let's begin where most legends of rightful rule begin, with a broken kingdom and a stolen crown. In Egyptian myth, order isn't just a political idea, it's a cosmic rule, a law of reality called Ma'at, truth, balance, harmony, the way the world is supposed to function. And the thing that threatens Ma'at has a name too. Isfet, chaos, violence, disorder, the forces that unravel creation. Horus becomes the champion of Ma'at. But he doesn't begin as a victorious king. He begins as a child, small, vulnerable, hidden from the world. Because before Horus can claim a throne, that throne has to be ripped away. And that brings us to the tragedy at the center of Egyptian mythology, Osiris. Osiris is often remembered as a god of the dead, but in myth he is also a king, an ideal ruler who brings civilization, law, and fertility to Egypt. Under Osiris, the land is stable. The Nile flows as it should, fields grow green, people live within the rhythm of the gods. But then, Set enters the story. Set is complicated. He's not merely a cartoon villain. He's the god of the desert. Storms, foreign lands, sudden violence, everything unpredictable, everything harsh, everything that can't be tamed. Where Osiris is the black soil of the Nile Valley, fertile and ordered, Set is the red land beyond it, barren, scorching, dangerous. And in many versions of the myth, Set murders Osiris. The details shift from telling to telling, but the result is the same. The rightful king is gone, and Egypt is thrown into crisis. Because if Osiris is dead, who rules? And Set, being Set, doesn't ask politely. He claims the throne. Now imagine what that means in Egyptian thought. It's not just that a bad guy takes power, it's that the cosmic balance is threatened. The desert tries to swallow the river. The storm tries to silence the sun. Chaos sits where order should sit. And that's when Isis, Osiris's wife, master of magic, relentless protector, makes a decision that turns grief into strategy. Because a throne can be stolen, but a bloodline can return. Isis becomes pregnant with Horus, the heir of Osiris, the child who, if he survives, could restore Ma'at. But surviving is the problem. Because Set isn't just competing for a crown, he's competing for reality itself, and a living heir is a threat. So Isis hides. She retreats into the papyrus marshes, those tangled wetlands of the Nile Delta where reeds are tall, water is thick, and danger can be masked by mist. Horus is born not in a palace, but in concealment. And there, in the shadows of the reeds, the child grows. Not just growing physically, but growing into a symbol. Because Horus is the idea that legitimacy can be delayed, threatened, hunted, but not erased. Now, before we push forward, we need to clear up something that often confuses people. Because when you hear Horus, you might imagine a single, fixed character with one clean biography. But Egyptian mythology doesn't always work like that. This is a civilization that lasted thousands of years, across many regions with local traditions that sometimes blended and sometimes competed, so Horus can appear in several forms, like titles worn by different faces. You might encounter Horus as a great sky god, Horus the Elder, linked to ancient traditions of falcon deities soaring above the land. You might encounter Horus as the son of Isis and Osiris, the avenger and rightful heir, which is the version we're following most closely today. And you might encounter Horus as Horus the child, often called Harpocrates in later Greek contexts, shown with a finger to his mouth not as "shh, be quiet," but as a symbol of childhood. Different Horuses, overlapping identities. Because gods in Egypt weren't always separate individuals the way modern fictional characters are. They were forces, roles, aspects, titles. But no matter which form you meet, Horus always circles back to a core idea. Horus is the sky. Horus is protection. Horus is kingship. The falcon doesn't just fly. It watches, it sees, it hunts, it guards. And when you look up at the open blue above the Nile, that sky becomes Horus's domain. So when Horus steps into the story of the throne, he isn't just fighting for a chair. He's fighting for what the sky represents: stability, oversight, the rule that keeps everything below it from falling into chaos. As Horus grows, the question becomes unavoidable. At some point, hiding is no longer enough. At some point, the heir must stand. So Horus emerges from the marshes, no longer merely a child protected by his mother's magic, but a challenger stepping into the arena of gods. And his opponent is Set, the Stormbringer, the Desert Lord, the embodiment of violent disruption. Now, in many myths, you'd expect a straightforward battle: hero versus villain, swords drawn, winner crowned. But the Egyptian story is stranger and, honestly, more realistic. Because power doesn't always change hands on a battlefield. Sometimes it changes hands in arguments, in trials, in debates, in humiliations, in public tests. So Horus and Set don't simply fight. They take their dispute to the divine court. Yes, Egypt's most famous conflict becomes, in many versions, a legal case. The gods themselves gather to decide who has the right to rule. Set argues from strength, from seniority, from raw power. He's older, he's formidable. He claims he can protect Egypt through force. Horus argues from legitimacy, from inheritance, from the logic of succession. He is the son of Osiris, the rightful heir, the continuation of the proper line. And this dispute does not end quickly. In some traditions, it drags on for years. Which, if you think about it, makes perfect mythic sense. Because this isn't just about two individuals. This is about competing philosophies of rule. Do you crown the one who is strongest? Or do you crown the one who is rightful? And if the rightful one is young, vulnerable, untested, can he really hold the world together? The divine court demands proof. So the conflict turns into a series of contests. Some are athletic, some are magical, some are symbolic, and some are brutal. But each contest is a kind of lesson, because the myth isn't only telling a story, it's teaching what kingship should be. A king must be powerful enough to stand against chaos, but also legitimate enough to embody Maat. Horus has to be both. The trials vary depending on the telling, but the rhythm stays the same. Set tries to dominate, to humiliate, to overpower. Horus endures, adapts, and learns how to win not just by strength, but by being the right kind of ruler. There are episodes where Set and Horus transform, challenge one another, and compete in ways that don't feel like modern combat. And there are moments where the gods themselves hesitate, because Set is dangerous, yes, but he is also useful. Storms can destroy, but storms can also defend. The desert is hostile, but the desert is also a border. Chaos is terrifying, but chaos is also the thing you fight against to prove you deserve the crown. So you start to see the deeper Egyptian idea forming. Chaos can't simply be erased from existence. Creation itself includes it. The world is stable not because chaos is gone, but because order keeps beating it back, again and again, day after day, generation after generation. And Horus is the face of that victory. Eventually, Horus's claim is recognized, the heir is accepted, the throne is restored to the line of Osiris. Horus becomes king. And if you stop the story here, it's already powerful. The rightful ruler returns, Maat is restored, Egypt is whole. But Horus's most famous legacy isn't just that he wins. It's what the conflict costs him. Because in the struggle with Set, Horus loses something. Something that becomes one of the most recognizable symbols in all of myth. His eye. Here is where we arrive at the symbol you've almost certainly seen, the Eye of Horus. On jewelry, on amulets, on paintings, on tattoos, on modern designs that sometimes forget where it even came from. In the mythic struggle, Horus's eye is damaged, torn, or stolen, depending on the version. It is a wound. And that wound matters because the eye isn't only a body part, it's a cosmic organ. Horus is a sky god. His eyes are often connected to celestial bodies, sun and moon, vision, oversight, the ability to keep order by seeing clearly. So an injured eye is more than injury. It's a disruption of perception, a moment where chaos blinds order. But here's the key. The Eye of Horus does not remain lost. It is restored. In many tellings, the eye is healed through divine intervention, often by Thoth, the god of wisdom, writing, and measurement. Sometimes other gods play roles in its restoration too. The important part is the outcome. The eye becomes whole again. And that wholeness becomes symbolic of something Egyptians cared about deeply: repair. Not just victory, but restoration. Not just survival, but becoming complete again after damage. That's why the Eye of Horus becomes a symbol of protection and healing. It's not simply an evil eye charm or a mysterious emblem. It's the story of a wound being mended, of order returning after chaos tears something apart. And it's also why the symbol spreads into daily life. Because if you're an ancient Egyptian, you want what Horus has. You want protection. You want wholeness. You want the promise that even if something is damaged, your health, your family, your future, it can be restored. That's the Eye of Horus in one sentence. A cosmic scar turned into a protective seal. Now, it's worth pausing here for a moment, because if you go searching for the Horus versus Set myth, you'll quickly notice something. People will tell it differently. Some versions make Set purely monstrous. Some make him almost necessary. Some emphasize courtroom drama. Others emphasize physical conflict. Some highlight Isis's cleverness and magical strategy. Others highlight Horus's growth into leadership. And this isn't a problem with the myth. It's the myth doing its job across a civilization that lasted longer than almost any other. Different temples, different cities, different periods, each with its own priorities. A region that relies on border defense might look at Set and see a dangerous protector. A region focused on royal ideology might emphasize Horus as the perfect king. And later, as foreign powers rule Egypt, new layers are added, new interpretations grow, and the gods are blended with outside frameworks. So when you hear variations, don't think, which one is the correct version? Think, what was this version trying to explain? Because Egyptian mythology isn't a single book with one canon. It's a living river of stories, flowing through time, changing shape, but always carrying the same deep currents. And one of those currents is constant. Horus represents rightful order. Set represents destabilizing force. Their conflict explains why the world must be defended every day. Now let's return to Horus's victory and what it means. Because once Horus becomes king, the myth doesn't stay in the clouds. It lands on Earth. It becomes politics. It becomes ritual. It becomes the reason a human being can stand in a palace and say, "I am not merely a man, I am Horus." This is one of the most important ideas in ancient Egyptian kingship. The pharaoh isn't just chosen by Horus. In many royal ideologies, the pharaoh is the living embodiment of Horus. Not metaphorically, not poetically, ritually, and politically. Horus is the divine role the king occupies. That's why you see falcon imagery all over royal art. That's why Horus appears crowning or protecting the king. That's why the king's name and image become intertwined with Horus's identity. Because if Horus won Egypt from chaos, then every pharaoh must be a new Horus, constantly reaffirming that victory. And when the pharaoh dies, the dead king becomes associated with Osiris, lord of the underworld. So the cycle continues. Horus rules among the living. Osiris rules among the dead, and kingship becomes a cosmic loop: life, death, rebirth, order maintained across generations. The story of Horus and Osiris becomes the story of Egypt itself. Let's make Horus instantly recognizable, because once you know what to look for, you'll see him everywhere. First, the falcon. Horus is often shown as a falcon or as a man with a falcon's head. The falcon is a predator with sharp vision, perfect for a god of the sky and a protector of kings. Second, the crown. Horus can wear crowns linked to Egyptian rule: the white crown, the red crown, or the combined double crown symbolizing unified Egypt. Third, the royal pose. Horus isn't usually depicted as a wandering trickster or a distant creator. He's depicted as stable, authoritative, watchful. He looks like kingship. Fourth, the eye. The Eye of Horus is not just an eye. It's a specific stylized symbol, tied to protection, healing, and completeness after injury. And fifth, the throne connection. Even when Horus is not shown sitting on the throne, his imagery implies it. Horus belongs to the structure of authority. So when you see a falcon hovering behind a king's head in a relief, or a falcon perched above a royal name, that isn't random decoration. That is the myth carved into stone. Horus stands behind the crown. Now, there's one more layer to the Horus story that people often miss. We tend to think of myths as tales where the good wins and the bad is destroyed. But Egyptian mythology is rarely that simple, because Set does not always vanish. In some versions, Set is punished, yes. In others, he is assigned a role. He becomes a force that must exist, but must be constrained. Sometimes he's connected to the defense of the solar boat against monstrous threats. Sometimes he becomes the chaos that the king must defeat to prove himself. That tells you something important about how Egyptians viewed the world. They did not imagine a universe where darkness can be deleted. They imagined a universe where darkness must be faced. Daily, ritually, politically, cosmically. So the victory of Horus is not a one-time event like a superhero movie finale. It's a model for how existence works. Order is not permanent. Order is maintained. Before we close, there's a modern misunderstanding worth addressing, because it's everywhere. The Eye of Horus is often treated like a vague, ancient secret symbol tied to whatever conspiracy is popular at the moment. But historically, it's far more grounded, and honestly, far more meaningful. The Eye of Horus is a protection symbol. It shows up in amulets, in funerary contexts, and in religious art because it represents healing, safety, and restoration. It's not a generic mystic logo. It is tied to a specific myth: Horus's injury and the restoration of his wholeness. So if you've ever seen the Eye of Horus used as an aesthetic with no context, now you have the context. It's not about secret control. It's about surviving damage and becoming whole again. And that's why it endured, because that idea is universal. So what do we take away from Horus? Horus is the sky watching over the land. Horus is the heir that chaos couldn't eliminate. Horus is the god who proves that legitimacy matters. But Horus is also something more subtle. He is the mythic explanation for why leadership is not simply strength. It is responsibility. It is balance. It is the daily work of holding the world together. And in a civilization built around the Nile's rhythm, where floods could bring life or disaster, where deserts threatened the edges of farmland, where order had to be maintained by ritual and law, Horus was not just a character. He was a necessity. Because as long as Set exists, Horus must rise. Again and again. In every generation. In every king. In every dawn. If you enjoyed this journey through Egyptian mythology, make sure to like the video. It really helps the channel reach more people. Subscribe for more mythic deep dives from the Temple of Tales, and tell me in the comments. Do you see Set as pure evil, or as a necessary force that the world needs to wrestle with? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next tale.